Hi everyone, I'm Rosemary, and it looks like spring is in the air. And at Dollar Tree, they've put out their planters and other gardening items. So Nikki and I recently stopped by to pick up a sampling of their $1.25 planters for a high-end makeover. In addition, we picked up a few more everyday non-planter items to transform in our efforts to help combat DTIFS, Dollar Tree Inventory Frustration Syndrome. You know, that condition that develops when you fall in love with an idea online and head on over to Dollar Tree only to find that your store doesn't carry or is sold out. Well, these everyday items should help with that. Plus, these hacks can be applied to any planners, including thrift store finds or planners you already have that can use a refresh. So let's jump right in with the first planner we picked up in this terracotta-ish color with an embossed ridge design, which makes it a perfect surface for a quick and easy paint hack. But first, to prep this piece as well as all the plastic containers in this video, I will wash and dry the planter and then wipe with alcohol to prepare the surface for the paint. Then I'll take some multi-surface brown craft paint and begin painting the planter with a foam brush. Now, as I'm painting, I am making sure to get the paint under those ridges, and then I just smooth out evenly along the surface. Next, I'll take a wipe and gently wipe off the paint along the flat area. The idea here is to remove the majority of the paint from the flat surfaces while letting the paint remain in the crevices. Shadows of the paint will also remain along the surface, and you can decide how much or how little you want to wipe and create the color variations you like best. The result will be a multi-dimensional finish that gives your planter more of a handcrafted terracotta look. Not bad for $1.25 and a little craft paint. Here is another quick and easy paint hack, this time using one of these round planters with a raised design. Although I didn't get this on camera, I did gently sand the raised section before wiping with alcohol. Then once the planter was prepped, I took the same multi-surface brown craft paint from the last project and then using a foam brush, dipped it in the paint, then blotted most of the paint off so that very little paint was left on the sponge. Next, I began painting along the rim of the planter and gently brushed over the surface of the design, painting only the raised area. I also only painted about an inch down or so from the top. And then once I had done that all the way around the planter, I began painting instead from the bottom to the top. This is mostly the better angle to paint to get just that raised area of the design, but it does get a little tricky to maintain that once you get to the top, which is why it's best to paint the top portion first and then start coming from the bottom next. And if you get any paint on the non-raised parts, you can just wipe that with a wet Q-tip. And then once the paint is dry, it would be a good idea to apply a protective coat of spray varnish on top. Next, to give the planter a little extra pizzazz, I wanted to add a base to the planter with this bangle bracelet that I picked up at the thrift store. To bring the color of the bracelet more in line with the planter, I again took the brown craft paint and applied a nice thin layer. This way, the paint was still translucent enough for the color variations of the original to show through, but with a hue that now matches the planter. Once the paint was dry, I glued the bracelet to the bottom of the planter using E6000. And don't forget to pop out those drainage holes on the bottom. And then wowza! An elegant upscale looking planter to enhance your decor, looking like a find from a high-end store. It'll be our secret that it's a Dollar Tree planter enhanced with paint and a thrift store bangle. For the next planter transformation, we picked up one of these glossy planters with a snap-on saucer. I separated the two pieces and that bottom just snaps right off and then began sanding. Since this one has that glossy finish, it is extra important to do that sanding step, and I did sand both pieces, then wipe with alcohol. Next, I'm going to take the saucer and glue 3 beads to the bottom to create little feet. I had these beads on hand, but Dollar Tree is now selling wood beads in the craft section. I'll set the saucer aside and turn my attention to the planter, which I'm going to paint with my favorite, spackle paint, which in this case is a 1-to-1 mix of Dollar Tree spackle found in the hardware section and Waverly chalk paint, in this case in the color plaster. I have this big honkin' bottle here because I use it so often, but those small bottles that Walmart sells, they do go a long way, and can you believe they are still just $1.67? And then I'll give it a good mix and paint that right onto the sides of the planter. I'll paint all the way around, let dry, and then give a second coat. While that is drying, I'm going to go ahead and switch back to the saucer, and for that I'm going to paint the entire thing, including the beads, with this Waverly chalk paint in the color hazelnut. And here is that $1.67 size I was talking about earlier, and as you can see, a little goes a long way. I'll again set that aside to dry and go back to the planter, which for this next step I'm going to divide into 8 sections, using the holes on the bottom as a guide. I took a Sharpie and followed around from where each hole is and marked a black line along the bottom side of the planter. This will create sections for each of the designs that I'm going to make. To start, I'm going to take some apple barrel craft paint in the color caramel and mix that with some Mod Podge in a 2/3 to 1/3 ratio. Then I'm going to paint one of those sections on the planter with the paint Mod Podge mix. Next, I will immediately take the end of my paintbrush, and note that this brush does have a pretty thick end, and scrape the paint away, making a leaf print. I'll create a stem up the middle, then add simple leaves to each side of the stem. I'll then go back and add a line in the middle of each leaf. From here, it's a pretty nice, clean, simple print, which may be all that you want to do, but I decided to go ahead and go back and enlarge the leaves to either side, as well as add additional middle lines to create more dimension and intricacy. Once I was done with my design, I moved on to the next section, again painting the section and carving the design through the wet paint with the end of the paintbrush, and I did this all around the planter. As for the saucer, I decided to give that a faux wood look by adding some Waverly Antique Wax, and with a very dry chip brush, gently brush the wax over the painted surface to create that faux wood grain. And then how fun is this? Just think of all the designs you can do with this technique and how you can employ it with other colors, etc. I'm really happy with how this came out, and I'm excited about using this technique for more DIYs in the future. I just love this next planter using the Dollar Tree terracotta pots, even though it kind of gave me a hard time. They come 2 to a pack, but they're small. However, you can use this same technique on larger pots that you can pick up at home improvement or craft stores for just a few dollars. Unfortunately, I only bought 1 pack of these from Dollar Tree, and that was a mistake, since I immediately screwed up the first one, applying way too much white accent paint, which would have made it impossible to see the print designs I want to make using these lavender stems and white chalk paint. So to fix, I thinned the white chalk paint even more with water, and then using my fingers, I just smudged on a white shadowy background. This could have been even more shadowy, but since this was the only other pot I had and I didn't have time to run back to Dollar Tree, it was going to have to work. To create the print design, I took a makeup sponge and applied some ever so slightly thinned chalk paint to the lavender cutting, making sure to get into all the nooks and crannies of the leaves and the bloom, but then blotting off the paint almost like a dry brush. Then I pressed the cutting onto the side of the pot, but it was too big, and I was ready to jump in the car to make the trek to Dollar Tree for more pots. But I thought, well, either way, the stems need to be smaller to fit this pot, so I decided to use the smaller clippings, and that worked much better. So I decided to plow ahead and just continued that pattern all the way around the pot. Then I cut the bloom down a bit in size and went back to add it to the leaves. Much better. I had much more control of the transfer with the smaller stem, and you can see it's much better than that first attempt. And then, oh so pretty. And the Dollar Tree size ones work great for smaller plants, but like I mentioned, I could have stanned it to have less accent paint in the background, but overall, loving the look of this planter, and will definitely do again on a larger pot, hopefully with less trouble. I'm just loving that streaky rust finish several of the major retailers are featuring on their planters. And to create a Dollar Tree version, I took this a large planter and again gave it the sand and wipe with alcohol treatment. Next, I took some Waverly chalk paint in the color pumpkin and painted on 1 coat. As you may have noticed, I really like chalk paint, at least the first coat, when working with plastic, as I find it really bonds with the plastic, and when allowed to properly cure, it gives a nice durable finish. Once the orange base coat was on, I created that streaky look by applying the brown craft paint from earlier with a chip brush. I also added in a little black paint applied the same way. I'm painting one section at a time because while the paint is still wet, I want to add cinnamon to the top. This is just regular cinnamon, but I bought a bottle just for crafting so that I can scoop it up when it falls and put it back in the bottle. Since the sections will have spaces in between, I went back afterwards and applied more paint, then again sprinkled with the cinnamon. And then that's it. A quick, easy, and inexpensive way to get that high-end look at a fraction of the cost. And now moving on to the everyday Dollar Tree items part of the video, starting with this cake carry container. I thought it would be fun to do a variation on the rust finish, so I started again with the sand and alcohol treatment and then painted the dome lid with 2 coats of the chalk paint in pumpkin. Once the base coat was dry, I took some of this folk art metallic paint in the color aged copper and applied a coat on top. You can see how this gives a nice metallic finish. However, if I would have painted directly onto the plastic without the chalk paint base, it would have been completely translucent and would require many applications before getting the desired finish. That would be bad for 2 reasons. One, this paint is more expensive than the chalk paint. It's about $2.50 a bottle, not much, but still, and it would not be as durable because, in my experience, nothing has staying power like chalk paint. I set that aside to dry and next wanted to make some decorative loops for the sides. So I took 2 of the Dollar Tree shower curtain hooks and 2 of the wood cubes from the craft section. I used wire cutters to remove the plastic clasp in the middle. I'll replace it with one of the wood cubes, then use E6000 to glue in place. Once the glue is set, I'll give the hoops the same paint treatment as the container with pumpkin chalk paint as the base and the aged copper on top. Next, I wanted to add a cool faux patina look to the planter. To achieve this effect, I again took some spackle and this Waverly chalk paint in the color agave. I mixed the 2 together, then applied in streaks with gloved fingers. The idea is to create a partial patina topper while still allowing parts of the copper base to show through. By adding the spackle to the paint, we were able to get this feathering effect that the paint alone would not have provided. You can do the patina as heavy or as light as you like. Once the bowl was done, I did the same effect to the hoops, and once everything was dry, I attached the hoops to the side of the bowl with some E6000 glue. A great faux finish effect, and of course you can do this on planters or other containers, not just this cake carrier. On our next everyday item planter, we used this white waste paper basket, and again it got the sanding and alcohol treatment. And I painted it with 2 coats of the spackle paint, and again I used Waverly chalk in the color plaster for the paint. Once the paint was dry, I took some of this non-slip rug matting that Dollar Tree sells and cut about a 6-inch wide piece. Then I took some Titebond glue and glued it around the container. When the glue dried, I painted the entire piece with more of the spackle paint that I had thinned with a little water. To give the planter a little stand, I used this plastic bowl that comes 2 to a pack from Dollar Tree, and I also gave that a few coats of the matching spackle paint. Once the paint was dry, I used E6000 to glue the bowl to the bottom of the planter. However, I forgot to drill the drain holes, so I recommend you do that first. And I am just thrilled with this one, not only because I'm happy with the way it came out, but also because I now have the perfect planter for the gorgeous plant that my neighbors gave me. Not bad for a trash can, a bowl, and a non-slip mat. Here is another everyday Dollar Tree item idea using the locker-style plastic storage bin. I again prepped the surface, but before painting, I wanted to cover the cutout handles at the top of the bin. So I took some duct tape and taped over on both the inside and outside of the bin. I mixed up some more spackle paint, but this time I used the Waverly white paint as the paint color. I then painted the bin with 2 coats of the paint. The paint was dry. I took some Jenga blocks and glued them over the tape with some E6000. I let one side set up and then I did the other side. Next, I wanted to make a little wood stand for the planter. To make, I made 10 sets of 2 blocks and 4 sets of 3 blocks. Then I took 3 of the 2 block sets and placed 1 block perpendicular in between the first and second and third sets. I glued those together and made 2 in that formation. Next, I took the 4 3-block sets and glued those all together. I then took the previous combos and glued them on top as shown. Once all the glue was dry, I took the bin and centered it on top. Now, there's only going to be a small amount of hangover space, so you need to make sure you have enough space for the additional attachments in both the front and the back. And then I placed some Titebond glue on the wood pieces and added the bin. From there, I attached the remaining 4 sets of 2 blocks to the end pieces. And then what a sweet little planter. The wood base elevates it, literally, and then the spackle paint gives it a nice texturized finish. You would never know it began life as a Dollar Tree plastic bin. Well, I hope you have enjoyed our Dollar Tree planter transformations. If you'd like to see more great DIYs, click on this video here. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.